Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George Affleck.
And it is time for
Hello, Mata. Hello, Fada. Here I am in Camp Vancouver. UnSpun.
Camp is very entertaining, and they'll say we'll have some fun if it stops raining.
Nice.
Very Vancouver. That is my favorite opening yet. I didn't
really?
think you could top your 007, buddy. That was really
McLean
good.
likes it when I sing too, so you know.
He does. Well, you want to keep the boss happy, right, George Affleck? At George_Affleck on Twitter. At Jody Vance on Twitter, at UnSpun Podcast, and the Orca.ca is where you find all of what we're talking about here on the program. We had a little bit of a feisty pre-show meeting today, George Affleck.
We went on a bit long, actually. We're late now starting, but
we don't always agree.
No, not always. In fact, it gets heated sometimes. That. Yeah.
I know. I love it. I'm like, and you're like, and I'm like, ah.
There's more swearing in the pre-show.
Yeah. We're going to try and keep it clean.
Yeah.
Man, I've already done 3 hours of radio today, and it was a very, very busy show.
Yeah.
And part of it was a discussion about our first topic of conversation, which is a big story this week in Vancouver. We're keeping it in Vancouver because the Vancouver Park Board, yet again, making headlines with us. Interesting decision, George. Break it down.
Well, they have decided, as we talked about last week, I've been very vocal about this publicly, and I've been interviewed on it, to pass a bylaw that allows camping from basically dusk till 7 a.m., 8 a.m. At parks across the city, and for homeless people. But you know, how do you determine if somebody's homeless in a tent? You know, it's basically they were saying, "Come on to Vancouver, come camp for free." Why go to the provincial campgrounds when you can come to Vancouver and park in our beautiful campgrounds in Strathcona, Point Grey Road, Stanley Park, can we go on?
Spanish Banks.
And don't worry, just leave your garbage lying around and we'll figure it out. It's off the charts of nuts.
I can't believe it. And I had a discussion this week because I've been filling in for Mike Smith on CKNW, and John Cooper, our friend and park board commissioner, came on. And we don't always agree, me and John, on everything. But this one, we do actually have a similar mindset of how does this help anything, was our conversation about it. And then it leapt into, and how is an amendment to a bylaw that some of the Cope Green Alliance Park Board members are attaching to, like a court ruling from 2012 or something?
2009.
No, 2009, thank you. Long time ago, about how perhaps allowing people to camp in Vancouver parks will stop people from camping in Vancouver parks, because it doesn't actually touch on the Strathcona or the Crab Park or the Oppenheimer Park encampments.
Yeah.
It does nothing to help the problem, and it actually creates kind of a new one. And today the new news on it is, do you know how many park rangers there are?
I know how many there are, because I put a motion forward before I left office to try and increase that number, and got shot down by Vision Vancouver, and John tried at part got shot down by them. There are 14 full-time park rangers, but they don't all work at the same time. So how many, you found out, didn't you? How many are working at any given time?
Typically they like to have 6, but in that 14, there are a couple that are part-time that make up a full-time position. So there's actually like 6, 8. And then auxiliary, there's 48, I believe, auxiliary, which are volunteer who can turn down any shift anytime. There's 1 dispatcher, 2 full-time workers who can't work in the field due to medical restrictions. So very, very few, George. And in order for a park ranger or a bylaw officer that's part of the park board to respond to a homelessness issue, which camping in a Vancouver park would be, there needs to be 2 together to do it, or they cannot respond.
Because of security or whatever, you know, and there are 240 parks in Vancouver. And from what I understand from John, about 25% of those fit within the criteria set out in the bylaw. I mean, it's really just I just think, having traveled around the world myself, and I slept on beaches all the time. I slept in parks. I remember sneaking in Tel Aviv into the lifeguards tower, and I slept there for a night. In Eilat, down in southern Israel, I slept on the beach there. We'd go there for weekends, a bunch of us from the moshav that I was living on. We'd sleep on this beach. That's just standard procedure, and it wasn't allowed. And people do sleep in our parks already, homeless and non-homeless. But to create a criteria that says it's okay from this time to that time without any ability to police the new bylaw. The previous regulation, if they wanted, was, and a lot of parks had closed. This park is closed from dusk till dawn.
Right.
And
you
it wasn't
cannot park in this parking lot.
Right.
You cannot park.
Exactly. You can't take your girlfriend in high school and park in this lot and neck. As we would have done when I was in high school.
Totally did that in high school. Totally did.
And I got the dot. What's going on?
Steamy window. You're like,
nothing.
Oh, it's not our parents.
Exactly. I won't tell you about another story that happened at a park and involved marijuana. But anyways, that's another story for another time.
Okay.
So anyway, the decision in 2009 was based on discrimination, that this was a discriminatory process, and but if you say the parks are closed to all people from dusk till dawn, then it's not discriminatory. It's just a fact of life, and therefore nobody's allowed in this park. But now we've said, okay, well, this park might be closed, but you can camp here. It's so.
I don't get it. Again, I don't get it. I don't understand.
There's examples where it's failed. San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, all have tried this, and it's
Santa Monica Pier for decades was that. It was a cardboard city at night. As soon as the sun went down, you'd have people on Santa Monica Pier, all the tourists and the people who lived there and everything. And then just as the sun was hitting the horizon, the cardboard boxes would build up, and there would be a tent city at night, and then in the morning it would all be cleared out, and then the city workers would have to come in and clear out all the garbage, and then the regular tourist folk would come back to that. It was wild to watch. Wow. I lived in Venice Beach for a year and a half, and it was quite something to witness.
That sounds very expensive to move in and out.
It was, but it's also the people who were there didn't seem all that happy. I honestly believe that the mass majority of people who are living rough in Vancouver right now, and in Metro Vancouver and the outskirts as well, would really love to have an affordable place to live.
Yeah.
And something above a shelter or an SRO or whatever.
Absolutely. And they have said about this bylaw that they didn't like it either. So nobody liked this bylaw.
Nobody likes the bylaw.
Whatever side of the spectrum you're on, or whatever side of the issue on, nobody liked it. So why did you pass it? What problem were you trying to solve with this bylaw is a question I always ask when you're creating new laws and regulations. What problem are you trying to solve? Well, it turns out you're actually creating more problems by creating this bylaw, because it's not enforceable. It doesn't make the homeless community happy. It doesn't make the non-homeless community happy. It doesn't make anybody happy. And obviously the big question, and I'm of course getting attacked for being on Twitter for how can you not care about homeless people? Well, of course I do. The question is always about housing. It comes back always to the biggest issues about how do we deal with housing. Housing is the biggest issue. And Vancouver, as I always say, cannot solve this on its own. It has to be a national initiative. It has to be done through federal government initiatives, which have not now been in place for almost 30 years. We have no real, truly federal housing initiative that exists for almost 30 years. It was dismantled by Jean Chrétien, and it has never been replaced by successive governments of all political stripes, and that's very, very concerning.
Tragic. It's tragic. What would we have done without those walk-ups back in the day? I can rattle off all of my addresses that I had. My very first apartment that I ever had by myself, that had my big tube TV that my parents gave me, that that's how you change the channels, 12 channels. And my IKEA furniture that was in my bedroom at our house in Tawasin. 2057 West 2nd. I love that 400 square foot apartment that opened up, my windows opened up to the parking spaces in the lane between 1st and 2nd Avenue, just east of Arbutus, if memory serves. And I loved that place. It was not fancy. The bathroom was tiny. The kitchen was a postage stamp, but it was mine and I could afford it. And I think what's lost now is this, 20% of that building is going to be, for affordable housing. It's like 20% of what? What will it look like? And what are the fixtures like? And everything's built for a billionaire now, or a millionaire at now. Where are the easy parquet floor, simple, make it work?
And those and those
Why are
those
we not
those
building
buildings
them?
were done through a lot of them through this federal initiative in the
Yeah,
70s, which was basically a tax incentive program. Like if you were a business you could take your money and reduce your taxes, whether it be business or personal, invest in a project as a group or whatever, build this thing, and then you reap the rewards from the rental as a market
what a
rental.
great
These
idea.
were all market rentals, but the massive amount of building that went on in the late 60s and early 70s that created a
That is
significant amount, and not only in
brilliant.
Vancouver, I lived in Langley, they were
Yeah.
everywhere. And that ended in the late 80s, early 90s, that program, and we've never really replaced it. And it's tax incentive programs, I believe, for building housing, get the people who have the cash incentive to invest into housing, and you'll see significant construction happen if, of course, the city of Vancouver can approve things.
Way to segue me. Oh, I need this segue bad, because this West Broadway and Birch, like how many years, how many man hours, man and woman hours, how much staff time and energy went into getting to the point this week where there was going to be a vote on a building that was already approved at 16 stories. We talked about it last week. Now on West Broadway, that is going to be a transit through fare with the Broadway subway line coming. You've mentioned how many times there's no plan for Broadway. We're doing the city plan first.
It's in the works. No, yeah, well, they're doing both, but we approved the Broadway plan process when I was there. That's over 2 years ago, and I don't know where it's at, to be honest. And it's unfortunate because this project that you're talking about, it falls into the gray zone. It doesn't meet because it was grandfathered as part of not the Broadway. Because it was outside, because it was in the works before the Broadway plan process was created. So they have the ability.
Because everything else would be stalled, right? Just to be clear, because if you put a proposal forward, you got to wait for the plan. But this one was already in at 16 stories before, but can apply to rezone to 28 because of its grandfather status.
And also because of the other programs that exist, MERPs and all the other programs. So the council this week, as you know, and they didn't make this decision, and we can talk a bit about that process, but you have to remember, in a public hearing process, your decision is based on the facts of what you have in front of you. Majority of those things are policy initiative, the policies of the city, the regulations that this project falls into. Does it tick all the boxes and permit and follow the rules, whether you like them or not? That's another battle. If you don't like, Rental 100, or you don't like the MERPs thing, or you don't like this, that's a whole other battle. But once that policy is in place, then if this project meets that criteria, and it was very frustrating for me when I was in office, when I go, ugh, this project fits the criteria,
everything,
but it's a terrible project. It doesn't matter. So the only thing you're left with, and I think in this case, is really your argument will be people don't like it. And that's a tough argument to make, to say people don't like this project. Well, what number of people who certainly lots of people show up at council and complain and scream at you, but is that the real number of people that there's no, they give you data on the neighborhood and things like that, so you have to weigh all that. But you have to be careful not to make a decision based on the emotions of people who come to council. Your job is to base your decision on a rezoning or on a development in a public hearing on the facts at hand, based on the current policies that exist. And that's the only thing this council needs to be thinking about, and they should be making that decision faster, but they have to obviously listen to people. So now we're waiting another week before we find out this decision. And why is that?
I want to ask you, why is that? Because the processes of the inner workings of city council get more complex. They're like, I try and follow the bouncing ball, but it often feels like everybody's pulling in an opposite direction. Like it's just very disjointed, where in our prior incarnation of City Hall of a couple of years ago, it felt like there was an established group. That's what's happening. They already decided in the back room, this is all just theater. Thanks for coming. It's now it's just like, what is going on here? And I actually spoke with Sarah Kirby-Young, who's quite at the center of this latest controversy in City Council, because she found herself just about to vote, and it was asked, have all councillors seen all hearings? on this subject matter. And as she explained it, she had taken a leave on a specific day. It was a planned leave day for her. And she, for whatever reason, had a technical difficulty, could not access the footage of said meeting that she missed, and did not have a chance to bring herself up to speed on it. I asked the question, do you not work in teams with others who could help you with that screening process and ensure that you had all the information? Are there not notes involved and what have you? And she was pretty strict to the fact that, nope, it's not fun watching 7 hours of a meeting, but that's what she would do. And she didn't have a chance to do it, but she was going to abstain from voting to allow
recuse, I think, yeah.
She recuse,
yeah.
not abstain, because abstain would be, I don't like this, right? So
well, you're indecisive is, I hate abstentions. I never abstain. Abstaining is like, I'm not going to show you how I feel about this at all.
Right. Stop being a politician if you're going to abstain.
Yeah.
So recuse yourself because you don't have all the information. And what's the policy about a vote? Could they have just gone forward with this vote?
Well, there's a couple things going on here at play. First of all, I'm very disappointed that she didn't find a way to watch those videos. That's not cool. That's not cool at all, to be honest. I would say that that's not a big ask to find the time. First of all, I don't know why she missed a public hearing meeting for personal reasons in advance. I mean, I know the meeting was added, but you generally have to assume in a council week that you make yourself available. And generally the only reason you should miss a meeting, and I only missed a couple in my 7 years, it's either because of city business that you've been asked to be on, so you can't go to council because you've been asked to do something else, or it's health related, personal, something else. It's not a good enough reason. So I don't know why Sarah.
But we don't know. It's not a health thing.
Yeah, it might have been.
Maybe.
But she should have said that if it was, because that would alleviate. She didn't say that, so I don't know what her personal thing was. It wasn't city business because she didn't say that. And so if it was a personal thing, then absolutely she should have found the time to watch those videos in advance of the meeting. What happened was, and she says this never happened before. I can't remember if it happened when I was there, but because I always watched the videos. I think a few times I couldn't, but it wasn't on a big vote like this, a really important one like this. You need to kind of crack it down and watch the videos, or listen to the audio, which should be available. The mayor, for whatever reason, and it might be a hidden agenda that he had, because it would have been it looked like it might have been a 5-5 split, so therefore it would have lost. Without Sarah voting, that's 10. If it breaks down the middle and it's 5-5, it fails. So it has to be a majority to win. So maybe he had a hidden thinking that Sarah might vote for it and therefore it would pass. I don't know. Maybe he was just being nice. And there's nothing wrong with saying, we're going to wait. It's like literally 5 days. It's, we're going to wait. The development will survive 5 days. Right. Wait for you to.
But Sarah said she didn't want him to wait. They didn't want to postpone.
I don't know
That's
why.
The weird part.
And some of her fellow councillors agreed with that, didn't support waiting, which I find curious. I don't know why they wouldn't say, well, that's okay. Sure. That's nice. I mean, how can you say no to thank you for the time? I mean, so you can do your job properly. It's all very, very mysterious. I think this, the hidden agenda potentially of the mayor. Why? Maybe Sarah, she didn't want to vote on this project. I don't know. I say that your role in office is to vote pro or con on an issue. If you don't like a project for whatever reason, and you're generally saying no to it, doesn't mean it's over forever. It means it's sending it back to staff, come back with something better with your team or whatever. In this case, so it's still in limbo. But just this process, as you know, when we talked earlier about speed and cost of development and all these things, this project ticks so many boxes. I'm not a big fan of these sort of major developments that underwrite developers in a significant way. I always felt uncomfortable about that. I prefer, again, going back to a national initiative where there's a development that happens that way, and that you're just not going to see any, because of this program in Vancouver, you're not going to see a lot of strata developments happening now, because there's a better incentive for developers to build these rental buildings, and it's a nice cash cow once they're built. It's good revenue. Margins are like 2%, 3% per year on the rent. For investment portfolios, that's a good return these days, 3 to 5%, potentially. So, I think that but in this case, this is a good example of, oh my God, can we just pick up the pace here?
Totally. That's what's driving me nuts. And it's driving me nuts, George, is that I can't believe we're still talking about one building that was already approved for 16 stories, could could be moving forward, but here we are again talking about it at 28. Now are we going to vote? No, we're not going to vote. We're going to push it 5 days. We're going to da-da-da. There's something else going on here. This feels like spin to me. And in my discussion with POCO Mayor Brad West, because right at the time that I was looking at this Broadway and Birch debacle, because that's what it is in my opinion, it just feels like it. Like it feels like it shouldn't be this difficult. We're broken in some way if we can't get even this done. Like, come on. And then I see a tweet from Brad West showing in all rental building approved and, a go ahead. And granted, downtown Port Coquitlam, different than West Broadway. I get that. But when I reach out to him and say, I put him in a very uncomfortable position because I was like, what would you do? And he's like, well, I can't really, not really supposed to. And I'm like, yeah, but anyway, what's wrong with it here? Because I just want to know. And he's like, well, I get out of your own way first, because it feels like the red tape is absolutely binding, and the permitting, which you and I have been talking about for 80 weeks on UnSpun, how that permitting process is so log jammed. And that's not a slight on the people working in that office. The backlog and the bog has not to do with the staff.
And there's all this discussion about the pro forma. I'm on Twitter. There's the pro forma is basically the business case, and there's all these different scenarios where a different pro forma, the different business case for the staff, then the developer has one, and then there's one for public. Like, oh my god, and people are saying this developer shouldn't be making money. How dare he make this much money? And I think that's like, okay, we live in a free market economy. The developer is permitted to make as much money as they want. I mean, and if they think the market can bear that cost, that's how free markets work. Now, using tax dollars to subsidize a developer to make more money is not cool. And so it's not cool. This is where I always had a challenge. If you've got a project that doesn't need incentive, then why would we incentive? But anyway,
going back to what you said, where tax incentives could come into play is to get people like, I don't know, you, me, and a dozen of our friends to say, if we've got any budget, any wiggle room to invest, why not invest in our own community and do that by together collectively funding a project like a 4-story or 3-story walk up.
You know how hard it is to do a co-share in Vancouver? It's insane. If I want to go with 10 friends,
2 friends doing it.
It's ridiculous though. The process is
taken them 12 years. Insane. Just stratified a duplex. So
they had to stratify it.
They had to stratify it.
Like, come on.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to what Premier John Horgan is likely talking about right now as we speak. He was supposed to be on this morning at 10 o'clock with his regular Thursday briefing. To address, the latest. He has his phone call every Thursday with the Prime Minister. All the premiers get on a conference call. Today, though, it was delayed by a number of hours because there's such uproar, George, about travel and specifically air travel from outside of Canada, but also within the country, as WestJet and Air Canada have both sort of removed any physical distance requirements. And Dr. Bonnie Henry mentioning day before yesterday, so that would be Tuesday, in her briefing about the shortcomings of the flight manifests with regard to contact tracing. So there's a bunch of balls that are kind of being dropped here that I think are going to hit the front page. Air Canada and WestJet kind of getting away with it, but international travel also a big piece here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's on the one hand, you're sort of going, who the hell was flying? Like, why are you getting on a plane? You
didn't pay me enough to get on a plane.
Clearly, you're not risk averse, or you're open to risk, I guess. First of all, getting on a plane, which is always risky. Now you're getting on a plane that potentially it seems like quite common to have people who have COVID-19. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that there's international travel, which is quite often it's people who are Canadian coming home from wherever, and there's a reason for it. It's not like just tourists,
right?
And then they have to self-isolate for 2 weeks when they're coming from internationally. It's a requirement, and so that's one issue. But this local travel from, say, Kelowna to Vancouver or wherever, where we're seeing cases being moved around, and you're saying Dr. Bonnie Henry's challenge with that is tracking. And so I think that air travel is important, especially to keep our national economy going. We need to be able to people need to go from Vancouver to Toronto still. I know that we think we can do everything on Zoom, but there are some things that need to be done in our economy and with our lives that need to be done. And if you're willing to take that risk and get on a plane, but the government should be making sure that there's checks and balances for this. Not only just taking your temperature when you get on, what happens afterwards? And it seems like there's a breakdown here, from what I understand, right? So
it's got people up in arms, man. Up till this week, Every email that I got with regard to our provincial motivations and health orders and whatnot were typically around long-term care facility. When can I see my family? When can I need to access, and what's happening, blah, 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 that. And then we got past that. And now it's all about borders. It's like it's hit the headlines, and the people that aren't as immersed maybe as you and I in the news cycle are now like, what is going on? Why are people able to travel here from Dallas, Texas, where it's da 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 da? And as you said, there could be people reunifying with their families here, coming home from having been away at school. They're, finally going, yeah, it's really bad here. I'm Canadian. I want to go home. You can, then you come here and you have to quarantine. And getting questions on quarantine, like, can I still go for a run? No.
Yeah.
Quarantine means go in your house and stay in your house, and people bring you stuff, or you order stuff to your home, and you keep physical distance at all time from everybody. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
The big commitment. You're allowed to, by the way, to fly. We can fly to the States as tourists.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's coming back. It's a challenge.
Coming back.
If I'm going to go to Palm Springs for 2 weeks or 5 days, I got to spend 2 weeks when I get back. And so it's completely, Americans it's wide open. You can fly to America.
But you can't cross the land border now.
No, I know, but you can fly there.
That's the difference. You can fly there, but you can't drive there.
Yeah.
Which is wild. Short on time, long on subject matter. I want to hit on that one thing that you sent me this morning that is quasi-international, the study, the Oxford vaccine
Some good news we're looking at. They're
Tell us everything.
I know everything. This is the Oxford study, which I think we've talked about. It was a couple of months ago that it was one of the first ones out of the gate. And they've had some real positive. They have had, they released all the stuff they had on some the monkeys that they tested on. It was very, very like 100%. Antibodies. So now they've been testing on as 10,000.
10,000
including
humans.
The doctor who's in charge, 3 kids, right?
Triplets.
So they're her own kids. She's tested this in her own kids. So it's a new kind of technology, but it's showing it's going into its final phase. And she feels confident that she'll be able to announce in September, or if not earlier, whether or not this is working. And they've already got billions of dollars in investment, and they actually will have out of the gate 2 billion doses available worldwide, and enough for all of England because it's where it's based. And then they're right now they're testing it in the U.S. So they're trying to test it in several markets, especially where they're seeing a lot of because the problem is you have to expose yourself to the virus. And so, that's one benefit, I guess, of America being in crazy land right now, is that you're exposed a lot more. So they are doing massive tests in the States right now. And so if those turn out good, then this will potentially, we might know. And as long as they don't get hacked by the Russians. That's
a whole other thing. That is so weird. Intellectual property stealing in a pandemic. Go Russia.
Why don't we just work together?
We're sharing. It's crazy. I will tell you a couple things for those who are consuming the UnSpun podcast as soon as humanly possible. 9 a.m. Friday morning, right after your 9 a.m. news on CKNW, I have a one-on-one with Dr. Bonnie Henry. Immediately followed at 9:30 by the Dr. Duanta Skrowanski, who is the lead author of the UBC study on serology that was released today that had some significant news for British Columbians on how the virus has been spreading in BC and how our physical distancing and washing of hands and staying home when sick and now wearing masks when physical distancing is not available. All those things are working and need to continue because it is keeping this virus at the lowest rates found literally in North America.
Bravo, BC, she said, right? Bravo.
She said Bravo, BC.
And if you miss those, we'll get McLean to put links up onto the Orca's site to those. That's a good idea. To those interviews.
I will make sure that I get those links. Yeah. And also, while you're at the Orca, you want to read my middle this week because I'm trying to give a voice to a group.
Parents.
Parents really need. They need somebody to scream and yell for them because I've been a single parent with a small child working ridiculously early hours. I don't know what I would have done without childcare.
I got 1 kid left in school and I'm looking at September going, we're juggling right now with owning a business. Yeah. He's going to grade 7. It's like, it's so.
What's your plan B? What's your plan B? Is there a plan B? Where's the government plan B for parents? That's what my column's all about. And it's not a rant at anybody. It's nobody's fault. But while we're talking about all the money that's being thrown around, and what about the people coming out of university, and what about the youth who don't have jobs because they've just come out of high school? Well, what about the parent who has 2 under 5
I can't imagine.
and can't go back to work? That to me is absolute horror. I can't imagine the stress on parents across British Columbia, and in fact across Canada for that matter. As far as schools go, we do expect, I had Terry Mooring, the BCTF president, on with me on CKNW. There is sort of a think tank going on trying to get things prepared for September. There will be, plans A, B, and C, of course, if there is a second wave that comes into consideration. And the Education Minister's office, Rob Fleming, did send a release back to us when we requested an interview. He was busy, but he said that in that release that August 1st is the target for laying out the plan for September so that parents could have some semblance of what to expect if we continue on in phase 3 in BC. I know that was a lot.
That's a
I
lot.
talked all day, man. I talked all day.
Time for you to have a nap.
See ya.
See you next week.